From Los Angeles, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand. Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Puck Podcast. It is Monday, February the 17th. This is our first period of a three-period podcast. In the first period, which some of you are watching on YouTube, we're going to recap the past week in the NHL on and off the ice. In the second period, we'll have an interview or a special feature. This week, it is a conversation that Doug had with Matt Larkin of the Daily Faceoff. They're going to talk a little Four Nations Faceoff. And our third period is our feedback segment where we read listener emails and we also talk about us and our off-ice report. You can find all three periods on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and you can get notified if you hit the bell and you like and all that kind of good stuff too, when we will have episodes out like this show, the Puck Podcast, the Puck Podcast Hockey Minute. We also have Puck Podcast reaction videos, and you'll get notified for our Puck Podcast watch parties.
And we hope you complete the Puck Podcast hat trick by liking, subscribing, and hitting the bell notification on our YouTube channel. Will really help us out and help the algorithm as well. Eddie and I have been working in sports media for over 30 years combined now at Fox Sports TV, Fox Sports Radio, NFL Network, and other places as well. But we've been covering the NHL as members of the media for over 19 seasons now. This is our 967th consecutive week of putting out the Puck Podcast with one brief interruption that we shan't mention again. And over the next three periods, starting in just a minute, we're going to tell you how every NHL team did in these past 7 days. We'll recap all the trades, signings, injuries, milestones, suspensions, and as always, we cover all 32 teams equally. So if your team had a good week, we're going to talk about them a lot. If they had a bad week, we're going to mention that as well. Some games are just going to be a quick score and a note. Others we will go more in depth on, but we are going to go over all of it. And we start with the big news from the past week. And for that, I turn it over to my good friend, my co-host, and a man who once paid for his sandwich by going through the tip jar, Eddie Garcia.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but I'm not denying it happened. Maybe
I watched it happen.
Some sort of a blackout of some sort. But we have hit the Four Nations face-off break as we are now off. The NHL season is off for the next 2 weeks. Of course, we'll be talking about the Four Nations face-off with our second period interview if you are listening to the Puck Podcast. But here in this first period on the YouTube channel and on our podcast, we are going to recap, as Doug mentioned, all the games from the past week. We go back to 1 week ago on Monday where there was only one game on that schedule for that day.
Does this mean there was no big news?
No big news this week. We had no big trades or anything to mention. There is news, though, that will be scattered throughout the recap of all the games. But our one game last Monday, Senators beating the Predators in Nashville 5-2. That's 5 wins in a row at that point for Ottawa. They were tied 2-2 in the third, and then the Senators closed it out with 3 straight goals. Ottawa had 5 different goal scorers. Adam Gaudette, 16th of the year, was part of it. David Perron, who has missed a good chunk of the season due to injury, gets his first of the season as part of the offense for Ottawa. And the Senators were holding down third place in the Atlantic Division, 3 points up on Detroit, thanks to those 2 points there. As far as Nashville, Philip Forsberg, who will be representing them with Team Sweden at the Four Nations Faceoff, scored his 19th of the year. Jonathan Marchessault, his 16th in defeat. And we mentioned that Ottawa had won 5 in a row at that point. Well, that was 5 losses in a row at that point for Nashville.
Yeah, Nashville, I think as we reach the Four Nations face-off break, they've got about 25 to 30 games left, depending on where they are in their schedule. They'd have to win 20 of them to get into the playoffs. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. One of the biggest disappointments in the NHL.
Absolutely. I think the only one that could beat them would be if the Rangers end up missing the playoffs because of the moves they made in the roster they had coming in. They were considered a cup contender. So disaster for Nashville, unfortunately. This will be a big test for GM Barry Trotz, who inherited a decent team, thought he made it a lot better with his offseason acquisitions, and it has blown up in his face, and he's looking at the business end, the credit card bill on these contracts that he signed, and not a lot of roster flexibility because of the moves he made in the past that have not worked out. So as for the Senators, though, Tim Stützle's assist was his 300th point of his career, and he became the youngest player in Senators history to reach that mark, and the second fastest German-born player to hit 300 points. Which German-born player, Eddie, got to 300 points faster than Tim Stützle?
I got to believe it's Leon Draisaitl.
Incorrect.
All right, who
Danny
is it?
Heatley. Danny
No,
Heatley.
that's a trick question.
It is, and that's why I did it. But he's also a former Senator. He did it in 286 games, Stützle in 338.
All right, we move on to an extremely busy Tuesday. 14 games on the schedule. I hate the scheduling in the NHL. It's ridiculous when they do this. One game and then you got 14 games. It's like, it's so stupid. But we will go to Tuesday in the 14 games, and we'll start with the Metropolitan Division leading Capitals knocking off the Atlantic Division leading Panthers 6-3. This is fresh off Florida's trip to the White House as well. Obviously, they're in D.C. Lars Eller and Nick Dowd scored to open the third period, breaking a 2-2 tie. Alexei Protas and Tom Wilson also scored their 22nd goals of the season. And Alexander Ovechkin scored into an empty net with empty net, he said, an empty net with a 10th of a second left, just beating the buzzer. That is goal number 25 on the season and goal number 878 of his illustrious career. At that point, he was 17 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal-scoring record with 29 games left to play in the season. But, Doug, I watched this game. Thought obviously this was a great matchup of two division leaders.
Yeah.
And continue to be nothing but impressed with the Washington Capitals. Didn't see it coming at all. But I mean, I don't know how much I the Ovechkin thing has been a very nice storyline, but it's certainly not. It's just part of their story, and frankly, it's kind of a smaller part of their story. I mean, just the way they've played as a team has been so impressive. The goaltending, obviously, with Logan Thompson, has been better than anyone could have imagined. And it just, I mean, as disappointing as Nashville is as surprising and impressive as what Washington has been this year for me.
I would agree. And I think a lot of credit obviously has to go to Spencer Carberry, who has got this team playing extremely well as a team. As you mentioned, it is not an individual that is having a great year. They're not getting lights out goaltending, though they are getting very good goaltending. They're not winning games 2-1 on a regular basis. They're scoring a lot of goals and they're getting them from everybody, and their special teams are playing well. So the coaching staff has a lot of credit coming their way, and I hope they will get some recognition in the offseason at the awards show. But Tom Wilson got his 10th shorthanded goal, tying Brooks Laich for the 7th most in franchise history. So he's contributing, and he's kept his nose clean. That's a guy that we haven't talked about getting suspended or getting calls with the NHL Department of Player Safety. So he has figured his game out to be effective and be controlled. And that's to his credit, because there was a time on this show that we were talking about, how long of a suspension is he going to get? Is this guy going to be missing half a season at some point? But he's been great. And Logan Thompson in net made 30 saves in this game, 13 of them in the third period. That extends his point streak. He's 12-0-2 in his last 14 games, tying Braden Holtby for the second longest streak by a goaltender in Capitals history. Jose Theodore is the leader on that list, by the way. He had 19 games with a scoring streak back in 2009, 2010, which you can hear us cover here on the Puck Podcast if you go back into the past episodes. But no, you're absolutely right. As disappointing as Nashville has been, it's as pleasantly surprising as the Capitals have been. And these are the best seasons as a fan, when you don't see it coming. When you go into a season and you know you're good and you know you're a Stanley Cup contender, I'm not saying you don't enjoy the season, but you're waiting for the playoffs. And there's also that expectation of, if we don't fulfill our potential, it's a disappointment. It's a letdown. But when you're just expecting us to be, we'll be okay, we're not going to be great, and they come out and they are awesome, I think the Winnipeg Jets fans are experiencing the same thing. We thought the Jets would be good. We didn't think they'd be best in the league good. It's extremely enjoyable, and you don't want the season to end. You just want the next game to happen as soon as possible. This 2-week break is probably killing these two teams because they believe the momentum is going. They don't want to have to reset.
Well, for Washington, they're enjoying it because they have 0 players on the roster in the Four Nations Faceoff, so they're going to get a lot of rest.
How about that?
For the final 27-ish games of the regular season into the playoffs.
And we will talk about that with Matt Larkin in the second period. That is a product of the nations that their roster is built from and the timing of when these rosters were picked. So we're going to get into that in the second period. Stick around for that. And if you're on YouTube, check out it's a great interview with Matt Larkin. He's very insightful over at the Daily Faceoff. Really recommend you go find the podcast if you're watching on YouTube and listen to that interview.
Continuing on Tuesday, we had William Nylander, who will be representing Team Sweden in the Four Nations. He had a hat trick, goals 31, 32, and 33 in the Maple Leafs 6-3 win over the Flames in Calgary. Matthew Nyes added his 20th in the loss for the Flames. Goalie Dustin Wolf allowed 5 goals on 29 shots. Joel Farabee, recent pickup in the trade with Philadelphia, scored his first goal as a Flame. Calgary remained 1 point back of LA for third in the Pacific. For Toronto, they moved 1 point back of Florida for the top spot in the Atlantic. Mitch Marner did not play in this game, dealing with some sort of an issue, but he would return later in the week, and he is expected to play for Team Canada in the Four Nations face-off.
And still waiting to see if he gets that contract extension or a new contract for them, or if he becomes a UFA. If he and Mikko Rantanen make it to free agency, it will be an incredible bidding war for the services of those two guys. And if any team can pull off what Nashville did last year and sign both, oh, mama, what an addition of talent that would be. But a long way to go from there. Both teams could re-sign these players. We'll see, especially with the increasing cap. And Joseph Woll did tie George Hainsworth, who we did not cover on this podcast because he was back in 1934, for the second fewest games to get to 40 wins for a Maple Leafs goalie. Jack Campbell has the record with 58 games to get his 40th win. Wow. Joseph Woll did it with 65 games. Yeah, Jack Campbell, just 58 games to get to 40 wins.
Now coming to an AHL city near you, I believe.
I think he's up the road in Bakersfield, right?
I think so, yeah. Canucks shut out the Avalanche 3-0 behind 25 saves from Thatcher Demko. Jake DeBrusk gets his 19th of the year. Brock Besser is 17th. And Drew O'Connor, just picked up in the trade from Pittsburgh, scores his first as a Canuck. 2 of the top defensemen in the game did not play in this game. Cale Makar for Colorado and Quinn Hughes for Vancouver, both missing due to injury. One of them would return later on. The other one would not, and we have news on him coming up. Canucks, meanwhile, moving to a tie with Calgary for the final wildcard spot in the West.
Brock Besser passing Pavel Bure for most career power play goals. He's now 7th all-time in Canucks history. And Thatcher Demko ties Corey Schneider for 6th most shutouts in Canucks history.
You mentioned the Jets. They won their 7th straight with a 3-0 shutout win over the Hurricanes. 29 saves from Eric Comrie in net. So even the backup is getting on the action there for Winnipeg. Nino Niederreiter's 14th of the season in the first period was all the offense Winnipeg would need in a battle of the Jets' number 1 ranked power play against the Hurricanes' number 1 ranked penalty kill. Winnipeg scored 2 of their 3 goals with the man advantage.
And you mentioned, we don't talk about this enough, but it's because it's a team stat and it's kind of an elusive one, but you mentioned that number 1 power play. You know from your Kings having a struggle power play, and the Ducks have an absolutely atrocious power play. I don't know if you noticed it last night in the Ducks-Kings game, but the Ducks trotted out 5 forwards on the power play.
The Kings have tried that this year too.
Yeah, and it's like, we'll try anything to get some more offense. And it still didn't work. I mean, they hit a pipe, but, it is what it is. The power plays suck is my point. The Jets' power play coming into this game, and you mentioned they had 2 power play goals, was 33.3% effective. 1 out of every 3 power plays they get, they score on. That is bananas good. That I can't, as I watch the Ducks on a nightly basis, I can't imagine being that effective on the power play and how much pressure that puts on the team you're playing. Because as you mentioned, the Hurricanes had the best penalty kill in the league and they couldn't stop them. So yeah, you got to play clean. You cannot give the Jets a power play. And if you do, God help you, because that thing, if you give them 3, at least one's getting in the back of your net.
Told you the Jets had won 7 in a row at that point. The Red Wings also had won 7 straight with a 5-4 shootout win over the Kraken in Seattle. Patrick Kane scored his NHL record 53rd career shootout goal to give Detroit the win. Lucas Raymond, who will be playing in the Four Nations for Team Sweden, added his 21st of the season in regulation. It's the second 7-game winning streak for the Red Wings since Todd McClellan took over as head coach. So they had the coaching bump, and then we thought they lost it, and they've regained it, or they're just playing a lot better under Todd McClellan. For Seattle, in the loss, Shane Wright did have a pair of goals, numbers 10 and 11.
Yeah, we're into our 2nd month. This isn't a coaching bump anymore. This is how they play under Todd McClellan, and it's exceptional. They are a very good team. They got their young players are thriving right now. And one of their young players, Moritz Seider, the defenseman, he got to 167 career points through 300 games, which passes Larry Murphy as the 5th most by a Red Wings defenseman through 300 games in franchise history. This is an original 6 franchise. The only people in Detroit that have had more points through their first 300 games as a defenseman: Paul Coffey, Reed Larson, Brian Rafalski, and Nick Lidstrom. So elite company there for him, and a great start to his young career.
Sabres knocked off the Blue Jackets 3-2. Alex Tuch, a pair of goals, number 17 and 18. His second goal was the game winner for Buffalo. In the loss, Kent Johnson scored his 16th for Columbus. Both teams were playing without their injured leading scorers, Tage Thompson for Buffalo and Kirill Marchenko for Columbus. Blue Jackets, with that loss, fell out of a wild card spot in the East, and Marchenko, who was hit in the face on the bench by a puck, is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks.
Hey, hand me that Gatorade, would you, Bobby?
Oh!
That's a reference to our old friend Gary, talking about a guy getting hit on the sideline with a football while he was getting some Gatorade. But yeah, that's bad luck. I mean, it's amazing. Honestly, it doesn't happen more often. You look at these benches, and the players are not paying attention. Sometimes they're looking down at the tablets. Sometimes they're retaping their sticks or getting some gear or getting some Gatorade. And the coaches as well. You know, these are guys in their 40s, 50s, 60s, or older. The reflexes aren't what they used to be, and those pucks are moving fast. So it's amazing more injuries don't occur while guys are sitting on the bench.
The Senators welcome back number 1 goaltender Linus Ullmark. He's going to be one of the part of the Team Sweden goaltending tandem, or I guess trio there. He had missed the last 44 games due to injury. Came back, unfortunately, didn't play great. 4 goals allowed on 38 shots and a 4-3 loss to the Lightning. That snapped Ottawa's 5-game winning streak. For Tampa Bay, Nikita Kucherov gets his 25th of the year. Brendan Hagel, who's playing for Team Canada, gets his 23rd of the season.
I think you may have that wrong. I don't think he missed 44 games, because that would put him
44
back
days. 44 days.
44 days. There we
Yes.
go.
Yes.
Okay. I was going to say that would put him back at the beginning of the season, and it was a late December injury, if I remember right. But Victor Hedman, with 2 assists, gets his 114th career multi-assist outing, ties Gary Suter for 19th most by a blue liner in history. The only active player with more is his countryman, Erik Karlsson, and I believe they will be teammates in the upcoming Four Nations face-off.
The Bruins blanked the Wild 3-0 behind 35 saves from Jeremy Swayman. He's one of the goalies for Team USA. Charlie McAvoy, one of his teammates on the U.S. team, scored a first period goal. That was all the offense that Boston would need. Morgan Geekie added his 16th as well. Despite the win, though, Boston remained 1 point out of the final wildcard spot in the East. For Minnesota, Ryan Hartman did not play in this game, hit with a 10-game suspension for that, I guess, that driving
Pile driver
his head into the faceoff last week. He did not play this week, but he is appealing the suspension. So we'll wait and see how that goes for him. But 10-game suspension for Ryan Hartman, who has had some issues in the past as well. That was part of his 10-game suspension.
Yeah, I would think the appeal is to get it down to 6 games, at the most. So he knows he's going to miss this week. It's not like you're going to get it down to 3 games, or they're going to throw the case out. So he earned that one. There's no doubt about it. And I'm glad Tim Stützle is okay.
Oilers edge the Blues in St. Louis 3-2 in overtime. Connor Brown gets the overtime game winner. Connor McDavid, of course, for Team Canada, scored his 22nd goal of the season. Leon Draisaitl, his NHL-leading 37th goal late in regulation that forced overtime. With the win, Edmonton moved into sole possession of first in the Pacific Division with 70 points. For St. Louis, they had lost 5 of 6 at that point. Defenseman Nick Leddy did return to the St. Louis lineup after missing 49 games with a lower body injury.
Connor McDavid had the 2 assists. One of them was in overtime. He now has 41 points in overtime in his career, which is tied for 3rd most in NHL history for overtime points. Now, keep in mind, overtime, since it's gone to 3-on-3, has been much more lucrative. So all these players are recent players. And the 2 guys that lead all time are Sidney Crosby with 47. Yevgeny Malkin has 43. Ovechkin and Patrick Kane both have 41 as well. Now Connor McDavid. My question to you, Eddie, will Connor McDavid become the first player in NHL history to have 100 overtime points? He has 41 right now.
And how old is he?
He's in his 20s, so he's probably got at least 10 years left.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I would think he's going to get close to that.
I mean, my goodness. The overtime rules definitely favor a team like the Oilers when you can put
and a player like Connor McDavid,
Evan Bouchard, Leon Draisaitl, and Connor McDavid out there. My God.
Islanders got by the Golden Knights 2-1. Bo Horvat's 19th of the year was part of the win, and the other goal scored by Brock Nelson. He'll be playing for the U.S. team at the Four Nations. That was his 16th of the season. He gets the game winner. Ilya Sorokin, 33 saves in net, as he has now won 7 straight starts. In the loss, Brandon Saad scored the only goal for Vegas. That was his first goal since joining the Golden Knights.
Ilya Sorokin now with a 7-game winning streak, one shy of the longest of his career. He had an 8-game winning streak back in 2020. And it is the 6th longest in Islanders history, record set by Yaroslav Halak back in 2014-15, which you can go back and listen to our coverage of it right here on the Puck Podcast archives.
Ducks edge the Stars 2-1 to snap Dallas's 5-game winning streak. Trevor Zegras scored the game winner for Anaheim, while John Gibson made 26 saves in net to win his 500th career NHL game. He is the 10th American-born goalie to reach 500 games played.
This is the 4th consecutive win for the Ducks, their longest win streak in a couple years now, and things are finally starting to turn around in the win column. They're not playing great hockey, but they're winning some games, and that was an impressive win over a good Stars team.
Canadians snapped their 5-game losing skid with a win over the Sharks in San Jose. 4-3 was the final. Joel Armia scored the game winner shorthanded in the third period. Cole Caulfield added his 26th of the year. In a game that featured 2 of the top rookies in the league, Montreal defenseman Lane Hudson had an assist for his 39th point of the year, while San Jose rookie Macklin Celebrini scored his 17th goal and had an assist as well.
How about Joel Armia getting shorthanded goals in back-to-back games? The 4th player in the Canadians' last 25 years to do that, and we've covered all of them, Eddie. Paul Byron in 2015-16, Max Pacioretty in 2014-15, and Chris Higgins in 2006-2007.
Oh, I remember them all like they were yesterday.
Don't you? Chris Higgins, friend of the show.
Yeah. Devils edged the Penguins in Pittsburgh 3-2 in a shootout. Timo Meier scored in the 7th round of the shootout to win it for New Jersey. Jack Hughes will be playing for Team USA, had a pair of goals, numbers 22 and 23. In the loss, Ricard Raquel, who's going to be playing for Team Sweden in the Four Nations, had his 24th of the season, also scored in the shootout in a losing effort. Pittsburgh had dropped 6 in a row at home against the Devils with that loss. And finally, on that busy Tuesday, Utah Hockey Club, 3-2 overtime win over the Flyers, thanks to Dylan Gunther's second goal of the game. He has 17 and 18 goals with his 2 goals in that game. And that was his first game back after missing 12 games due to an injury. They're happy to have him back. In the loss for Philadelphia, rookie Rodrigo Abels scored his first career NHL goal.
What was that name?
Rodrigo Abels.
And where is he from?
He's from the planet Earth.
He's from Latvia.
Oh, okay.
A 7th round pick from the Canucks. He is the oldest player to score his first NHL goal this season, and the 4th player this season that has scored his first NHL goal, 27 or older. He's 29 years old as the young man to you and me, but good for him. Realization of a lifelong dream and get that first goal.
And I believe the only Rodrigo to ever score a goal in the NHL. I could be wrong, but I don't ever remember another Rodrigo.
He's definitely the only Rodrigo Abels that has ever scored an NHL goal.
That's going out on a limb. We moved to Wednesday, where we had just 3 games to talk about. The Rangers beat the Bruins 3-2 in a battle of 2 original 6 teams trying to get back in the playoff race. Chris Kreider, who'll be in the Team USA lineup for the Four Nations, shorthanded goal in the third period was the game winner. Vincent Trocheck tied it up in the third period, and Artemi Panarin scored his 23rd of the year as well. In the loss, David Pastrnak scores his 28th goal of the season. Boston remained tied for the final wildcard spot in the East with Tampa Bay, both with 60 points. New York, at that moment, was 4 points out of a wildcard spot.
And did you see, Eddie, the tracking that they do for players with that chip on the back of their jersey that allows them to see how fast players are going? This was a game broadcast on TNT, I believe, and they tracked Chris Kreider on that shorthanded goal as he was, I forget who had got the assist, but somebody gets the puck in the defensive zone, starts flying the zone, and Kreider took off. He was going 24 miles per hour when at top speed, and that is absolutely cooking, man. And that's where speed kills, because the defenders were going as hard as they could. They simply could not keep up with him to break up the pass or prevent the shot. Absolutely flying.
Yeah, definitely great hustle play by Chris Kreider. Pacific Division leading Oilers got by the Blackhawks in Chicago 4-3 in overtime on Zach Hyman's power play goal in sudden death, his 19th of the year. Leon Draisaitl scored his NHL leading 38th goal of the season. In the loss for Chicago, Ryan Donato tied his career high with his 16th goal of the season. And the Kings outscored the Canadiens for a 6-3 win. Kevin Fiala led LA with a pair of goals, numbers 19 and 20. Warren Foegele scored on his first career penalty shot. Kings held a 3-point lead on both Calgary and Vancouver for the third spot in the Pacific at that point. Montreal remained 5 points out of a wildcard spot in the East.
Darcy Kemper, home winning streak of 6 games after that one. Only 2 Kings goalies in the past 30 years. So only going back 30 years, Eddie, not into the distant history.
Yeah.
In the past 30 years, 2 other Kings goalies have had a home winning streak of 6 games or more. Who are they?
Well, if one of them isn't Jonathan Quick, I'll be shocked.
You are correct. In fact, you did it twice, 2 different seasons. And who was the other one?
Well, the other one is an absolute crapshoot because the history of Kings goaltenders, you've got Jonathan Quick and Rogie Vachon, and the rest is quite the mixed bag. But I'll go with Felix the Cat Potvin.
Ooh, no, I'm sorry. The answer is Peter Budaj.
Oh, my
Peter
goodness.
Budaj, back in 2016, 2017.
Yeah. I'll never forget, I was at a game. I don't think you were with me. And there was a guy who was, every time he would make a halfway decent save, would yell out, Budaj the Jedi.
No, I was not with you there. You always get some interesting fans around.
I will never forget. It was really, I was like, okay, the first time kind of like.
Every time?
A little bit, that's kind of funny, I guess. Then after like the 7th time, we just like, all right.
There's a certain person, a certain type of person that if they get a laugh, if they get a reaction on something, they will hammer it home repeatedly, no matter how many times.
And I'll never forget him as long as I live. Budaj the Jedi.
That was actually his brother.
I hope it was, because it would then I'd at least have a good reason for him to be so happy about it. But anyway, let's move on to Thursday, where we had 9 games. The Capitals beat the Flyers 4-3 in Philadelphia, with Washington star Alexander Ovechkin scoring his 879th career goal, putting him 16 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal-scoring record. At that point, 28 games left in the regular season. Goal number 26 on the year for the Great 8. Connor McMichael added his 19th, and defenseman Jacob Chikrin his 14th in the third period. That was the game winner. Washington, leading the Metropolitan Division, moved to a tie with Winnipeg at that point for the most points in the NHL. At that point, they each had 79.
I missed my chance, but I had another trivia question about the Kings for you on that Wednesday game. I missed my window.
Darn.
It was about Warren Foegele's penalty shot goal. Damn.
I think I know the answer to that. The last player to score on a penalty shot for the Kings.
Let's hear it.
It was Austin Wagner.
That is correct.
Yeah.
I don't even. That guy could walk in here in jersey, and I wouldn't understand. I wouldn't recognize him. I'd be like, "Who are you?"
Well, I wouldn't recognize him, but if he had his jersey on, I think I could probably figure it out. But he was a guy who had a lot of speed and not very good hands. And his speed kept him around for a while, but after a while, then like, okay.
I remember I wrote down. I was at a Ducks game. This is 15 years ago or so, in the press box, and there was some dude. I think it was Andrew Ebbett for the Ducks. So maybe it wasn't that long ago, but he was fresh up. Anyway, there was some guy that just came up from the AHL, and he was absolute speed like that. But he would get scoring opportunities because of his speed, and he couldn't bury any of them. And I wrote down in my notes, I wrote NHL legs, AHL hands. And whoever the reporter was next to me is like, "You mind if I use that?" I'm like, "It's all yours," because I just do a podcast once a week, man. So I don't know where that went, but yeah, there are people like that have that speed. Ovechkin, by the way, in that game, you mentioned he scored a goal. He beat Ivan Fedotov, the 180th different goaltender he has scored a goal against. Since he entered the league back in 2005, 2006, he's scored against nearly half of all the goalies that have played at least one game in the NHL. He has scored a goal against 180 of the 369 NHL goalies since he came in the league. And of the guys he's played against, he's scored against 180 of the 215 different goalies. So if you're on that 35 goalies that kept him off the score sheet, that is a feather in your cap, especially next year when he beats, or next season, I should say, when he beats Gretzky's record, or maybe later this season. Let's hope.
The Atlantic Division leading Panthers got by the Blues in St. Louis 3-2. Matthew Tkachuk scored 2 goals, numbers 20 and 21. His second goal was the game winner with 12 seconds left. St. Louis had dropped 6 of 7 at that point. Maple Leafs knocked off the Kraken in Seattle 3-1 in his return from injury. Toronto goalie Anthony Stolhand made 27 saves in the win. He had been out since December the 27th. Matthew Knies scored his 21st, while defenseman Philippe Myers scored his first of the season and his first goal since 2022. Toronto remained 1 point back of Florida for first in the Atlantic. Eeli Tolvanen scored Seattle's lone goal, his 16th of the season.
It's always tricky based on how many games played, but the NHL counts Anthony Stolarz as a guy that is eligible for season-long stats. And so with that win, he leads all goaltenders in save percentage with .929 through the year and is second only to Connor Hellebuck in goals against average at .208. Anthony Stolarz, a former backup goalie for the Ducks, is one of the best goalies in the NHL right now. I wouldn't have believed it, but God bless him.
Lightning down the Senators 5-1. Braden Point, who's going to play for Team Canada, scored his 29th of the year. Jake Gensel, his teammate, will be on the USA squad. He gets his 27th. He also gets his NHL leading 13th power play goal as Gensel. And Brandon Hagel, another guy who's playing in the Four Nations for Canada, gets his 24th. Tampa Bay swept the 2-game home and home. It wasn't home and home. It was home and home for the Lightning. They hosted Ottawa Tuesday and they hosted them Thursday, and they won both games. Tampa Bay moved into third place in the Atlantic, knocking Ottawa into the number 1 wildcard spot. Both teams had 62 points.
Yeah, Ottawa came to Tampa with the third place position in the Atlantic and left in the wildcard spot. So a tough road trip right there. And a rare one, like you said. Play a game, stick around. We'll play again in a couple nights.
Very odd. Very odd. Golden Knights knock off the Devils in New Jersey 3-1. Jack Eichel, who will be playing for Team USA in the Four Nations, gets his 19th goal. Aiden Hill only had to make 16 saves in net in the win. Vegas moved 2 points back of Edmonton for first in the Pacific. Utah Hockey Club edged the Blue Jackets in Columbus 3-2 in overtime on a Dylan Gunther goal, his 19th. Columbus remained 1 point out of the last wildcard spot in the East. Wild edged the Hurricanes 2-1. Philip Gustafsson, he'll be one of the goaltenders for Team Sweden. 37 saves in net, while Vinny Hinostroza's first goal of the season was the game winner in the third period for Minnesota. Sebastian Aho, who will be playing for Team Finland, had the lone goal for Carolina, his 18th of the season. Avalanche beat the Flames 4-2 in Calgary. Marty Necas, 2 goals, numbers 18 and 19 on the season. His third goal in 7 games since joining Colorado. Arturi Lehkonen, who will be playing for Team Finland, scored his 22nd, and Cale Makar, of course, for Team Canada, back from injury, scored his 20th of the year. Another Team Canada member, Nathan McKinnon, had 3 assists. That gave him an NHL leading 83 points at that point. In the loss for Calgary, Jonathan Huberdeau gets his 21st goal of the season.
How about Mackenzie Blackwood, the move that we were kind of questioning the Avalanche made in net? Remember, they did the shuffling back in December to change their goaltending. Mackenzie Blackwood, his 13th win since joining the Avalanche back on December 14th. The only goalies that have won more games since then are Connor Hellebuck and Logan Thompson. And Logan Thompson actually is tied with him at 13. So he's been elite since joining the Avalanche, a new lease on life.
And the Canucks edged the Sharks in overtime in San Jose 2-1. Drew O'Connor scored on a penalty shot in overtime to win it for Vancouver. That gave him 2 goals in 3 games since coming over from Pittsburgh. For San Jose, Tyler Toffoli's 20th of the year, late in the third, forced overtime, at least got the Sharks a point out of it. Vancouver did move 2 points up on Calgary for that last wildcard spot in the West.
And Drew O'Connor, the second player in Canucks history to score a penalty shot goal in overtime. I'll give you a chance to guess the person because it's a former King, I believe, that did it back in 2016. Short-lived defenseman, and when he talks, people listen.
Ben Hutton.
Bingo!
If I didn't have that clue, no chance in hell.
Oh, of course.
Because
but he played for the Kings, right?
Very briefly, yeah. I think
right.
I think he might have been a deadline pickup just for depth.
But regardless, yeah. The fact that he was the last guy to score a penalty shot goal. And anyway, the last time to do it, anybody in the league did it, was just about a year ago, February 10th, as a matter of fact. So depending on when you're listening to this show, exactly a year ago, was Jake Wallman. So it is not something you see very often, the penalty shot in overtime, but twice in Canucks history.
Moving on to Friday, we had 5 games, and in a star-studded matchup, if you watch this game, man, the fireworks. The Colorado Avalanche edged the Oilers in Edmonton in maybe the game of the week, 5-4. Marty Necas scored the only goal of the third period. That's your game winner, giving him 4 goals in 8 games since coming over in the Mikko Rantanen trade. Also in the win, Cale Makar had 2 goals, numbers 21 and 22. Arturi Lehkonen had his 23rd. He seems to have kind of flourished. Lehkonen after the trade of Rantanen, he's getting those first line minutes now and kind of running with it. Nathan McKinnon, a goal as well, his 21st. He had 3 assists that gave him 87 points on the season. And in the loss, Leon Draisaitl for Edmonton gets his league-leading 40th goal of the season. Corey Perry, 2 goals in the loss, numbers 11 and 12 for him.
Leon Draisaitl, the third active player to record 4 consecutive 40-goal seasons. The others are Austin Matthews and Alexander Ovechkin. And the Avalanche became the 4th team. That was their 1,000th win this century, Eddie. They are the 4th NHL team to have 1,000 wins this century. Can you name the other 3?
Okay, let's see.
Think of teams that have been very successful, perennial contenders.
Tampa Bay Lightning?
Incorrect, surprisingly.
Oh, man, I actually thought I was going to have that one. Let's see. Pittsburgh?
Incorrect.
Dang.
They were very bad in the beginning of the century. 2 of them are in the Eastern Conference. 1 is in the Western Conference.
Carolina?
Incorrect. I'm afraid that's your 3rd strike. We go over to the other team with a chance to steal. The Bruins, the Capitals, and the Stars.
Okay. The Capitals over Tampa Bay is surprising to me. But anyway.
Yeah, I was surprised Tampa was not on there as well. And Pittsburgh, as you said, they've been very good for a long time, but they were very bad for the first 8 years of this century. So anyway, there you go. The Avalanche have been pretty damn good most of this century. They had a couple years of bad there that they really worked out well because they got Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar, and now they're back to being good again.
Well, you mentioned the Penguins. They are playing without injured star Sidney Crosby, but they still surprised the Rangers with a 3-2 win in New York. Philip Tomasino, power play goal was the difference. Ricard Raquel added his 25th of the season. Pittsburgh gets the win despite being outshot in the 3rd period 10-0.
10-0. And this was the dad's trip for the Penguins. So their dads were all up in there high-fiving and having a good time. In fact, Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin could be up there with their dads having a good time, enjoying the hospitality suite. Ricard Raquel, another former Duck, I got to give it up to him. I was not sad to see him go. He's a guy that's I thought was just okay. And I didn't think, but he's having a great season right now. As you mentioned, team leading 25th goal. He's on pace for 30 to 40 goals. If he gets hot, he could get to 40 goals by the end of the year. I did not think he had that in him, and he's really come through in an otherwise disappointing year for Pittsburgh.
And I think I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. He's playing for Team Sweden in the Four Nations Faceoff.
Yeah, he was recently named. He was not an original team member, but did get named to it.
Jets got by the Islanders 4-3. Winnipeg extending its winning streak to 8 in a row. Gabe Vilardi with a pair of goals, numbers 23 and 24. Connor Hellebuck, who will be one of the goaltenders for Team USA, got the win, his NHL leading 34th of the season. Jets at that point led the Central Division and the NHL with 81 points.
How about this? Connor Hellebuck, who's not an old man, is already tied for 5th all time for wins by an American goalie. That is surprising to me. And can you name any of the top 5? I think you know the number 1.
Yeah, Jonathan Quick.
Quick.
Ryan Miller is in there.
That is correct.
I don't know, like Tom Barrasso, maybe?
Oh, very well done. He is 4th place all time. Connor Hellebuck tied Mike Richter, and the only one you missed was the Beezer, John Van Beesbrook. So, but like I said, Connor Hellebuck's a young man. I think he's going to have the all-time record before it's all said and done. He's only 64 behind, or 54 behind Jonathan Quick right now. So a few more years, he could be the number 1 all-time American goalie in wins, which is, I guess you think of it. I mean, he's won a couple of Vezinas already, but it's just it's surprising that he's already that high on the list.
Kings edged the Stars 5-4 in a shootout. Kevin Fiala had a goal in regulation, his 21st, and in the shootout as the Kings improved to 17-3-1 on home ice, which is the best home ice winning percentage in the NHL. In the loss, Matt Duchene had a pair of goals for Dallas, numbers 19 and 20.
Was that Kevin Fiala that had that pretty little goal at the side of the net?
Yeah, the defenseman lost his stick, and he's like, I I can stick handle with this guy because he's not going to do anything. And he shot it right up into the top part of the net. Yeah. The Kings fans have been waiting for him to get going. He's red hot right now. And now we get the Four Nations 2 week off. So we're like, oh, right when he's on fire right now. But we'll
that
see.
was a very good game and a rare high scoring game for the Kings, who are the boringest team in hockey when it comes to goals, because not only do they not score a lot, they don't give up a lot. So combined, their games are usually very low scoring, but that was a doozy. That was my Grandma Fiddler game of the week. Very entertaining. And that goal by Fiala was chef's kiss, beautiful.
And the final game on Friday had the Blackhawks beating the Predators 6-2. Ryan Donato, a pair of goals for Chicago, 17 and 18 on the season for him. Connor Bedard added his 16th. Nashville had dropped 6 in a row with that defeat. Moving on
that game, excuse me, we've talked about it a lot this season. When is the hammer going to fall on Andrew Brunette behind the Predators bench?
It's not going to.
When you've lost 6 straight and the 6th one is to the Blackhawks, I mean, at that point, yeah, buy property. You're not going anywhere. You've got job security. That really seems.
It really seems, and we'll see what Nashville does at the trade deadline. But it seems like Barry Trotz is like, you know what? I believe in this team. For whatever reason, it ain't working. But next year, we're going to bring the band back together, and we're going to really show what we're made of. Maybe it works. It's possible. But if he wasn't going to fire Andrew Brunette at this point, then he can do pretty much anything. I don't think he's going to fire him.
He's going to do the George Costanza and drag Nash around the parking lot trying to get fired. I mean, this guy, it's amazing that he has not been replaced. I would think you would try something different before the trade deadline to see if coaching makes a difference. Obviously, as you said, probably not the case. We'll see if he gets the job again next season. But yeah, it does look like Barry Trotz believes in this roster for whatever reason, despite the results that we're seeing on the ice on a nightly basis. But again, 6 straight losses, and no offense to Chicago, you're terrible. When the 6th is to Chicago, come on, man.
Busy Saturday as usual, 14 games. We'll start with the Devils shutting out the Canadiens in Montreal 4-0 behind 34 saves from Jake Allen, a former Canadiens netminder. Made a save on a penalty shot in the final seconds to preserve the shutout. Jack Hughes gets his 24th of the year. Jesper Bratt, his 17th. He'll be playing for Team Sweden in the Four Nations. New Jersey improving to 5-3 since number 1 goalie Jacob Markstrom went down with an injury.
Jack and Luke Hughes each scored in the 3rd period. They are the 4th set of brothers in just the last decade to each score in the same period of hockey. Name those other 3 pairs of brothers, Eddie.
Well, I have to go with the Sedins.
That is correct. They are one of them.
The Kachucks.
That is incorrect. That's a great guess, though.
All right. Boy, who else? Brothers. I mean,
what you're doing right now to think is the last name of the brothers.
That guess did not help me. No,
you're delaying or stalling.
Okay. Sure.
Eric and Jordan Stahl and Eric and Mark Stahl.
Should have known that one.
Should have known that one. The Kachucks is a good guess, though. That's, they're prolific, and you would have thought they would have done it at some point.
Well, I don't know if they scored in the same period, but they do score in the same game coming up in just a few moments here.
Spoiler alert.
In our Puck Podcast watch party game from the past week, the Lightning took care of the Red Wings in Detroit, 6-3, snapping the Red Wings' 7-game winning streak. Brandon Hagel, a pair of goals for Tampa Bay, numbers 25 and 26. Braden Point gets his 30th. And we also saw the first NHL goal from rookie Dylan Duke, who played at the University of Michigan, goes back to the state of Michigan and gets his first goal in his first game. That was cool. Alex Lyons started in net for Detroit, didn't last long, was pulled in the opening period after he allowed 2 goals on 3 shots. In the loss for Detroit, Alex DeBrincat gets his 24th of the season, and Vladimir Tarasenko scored his 300th career goal.
Now, you remember watching that game with us because you were part of the watch party, Eddie, and you saw the Duke family celebrating the goal. One of those people, they had his sister, his parents, and his brother. His brother, Tyler, then went on to play in a game in that arena later that day and scored a goal into the same net, as he is for Michigan, and Michigan State were playing. So 2 goals for the Duke family into the
Wow.
same net on the same ice on the same day. Great
I-
day of hockey. And so
Yeah.
now
The family didn't have
Dylan,
to go anywhere. They just stayed in their seats.
yeah, and Dylan gets to go up and be the one cheering on his brother as he scores a goal
Wow.
later in the same night. So
Yeah, that might
great
be
night for the Duke
it
family.
might be a night that family never forgets. Just wondering.
Yeah, I
maybe.
think they went out to a good dinner that night, and let's celebrate.
Wow. Hurricanes roll over the Utah Hockey Club 7-3. Carolina scored 4 goals in the second period, 2 from Seth Jarvis, who's going to be playing for Team USA, his 21st and 22nd, and 2 from Sebastian Aho, who's going to play for Team Finland, numbers 19 and 20. Mikko Rantanen did not play in this game with a lower body injury. His status for Team Finland in the Four Nations is unknown. In the loss, Clayton Keller, 2 goals for Utah, numbers 19 and 20.
Well, I can reveal it is known he traveled. He's going to be playing for Finland.
Okay.
He left later after that update. And Seth Jarvis, his second 4-point game of the season, the only player with multiple outings since the start of the year. So he's had them both since the calendar turned to January 1st for Seth Jarvis.
Golden Knights pull out a 4-3 win over the Bruins in Boston. Vegas rallied down 3 goals, scored Tomas Hertl with a power play with 1:10 left. This was after they had another power play goal waved off because of a goalie interference challenge. They scored on it anyway. Pavel Doroforov scored his 23rd of the season. In the loss for Boston, Brad Marchand, who will be playing for Team Canada, gets his 12th straight 20-goal season for Brad Marchand. Morgan Geekie scored his 17th.
And his 14th overall, tying Patrice Bergeron for second most in Bruins history. Only Johnny Buchek has more 20-goal seasons in Bruins history. So not bad for the little man we love to hate. And Jack Eichel, that trade's kind of worked out for Vegas. He got his 50th assist of the season. Only the second player in Golden Knights history, and it's not very long, but it is illustrious. They've been very good since they came into the league. Only the second player in Golden Knights history to have 50 assists in a season. I'll be curious if Eddie knows who the other one would be or has a guess. I will give you a hint. You mentioned him earlier in the show. And also Eichel's 23rd multi-point game of the season, passing Jonathan Marchessault for most in a single season in franchise history. Any idea who the other Golden Knights player with 50 assists in one season is?
William Karlsson.
David Perron, who you mentioned
wow.
coming back from injury.
Yeah, I knew I didn't mention William Karlsson, so I don't know why I guessed that. Not very smart. We teased it earlier. The Panthers beat the Senators 5-1 in a battle of the Tkachuk brothers, who will both be Team USA teammates at the Four Nations. Brady scored his 21st in the loss. Matthew, his 22nd in the win. Alexander Barkov, who's going to be playing for Team Finland, also scored his 14th. Anton Lundell his 13th. And Sergei Bobrovsky, 26 saves in net for the defending Stanley Cup champs.
That is the third time the Tkachuk brothers have both scored in the same game. So they've never scored in the same period, but they have scored in the same game 3 times now. And as you mentioned, the Tkachuk brothers, that's going to be a problem, I think, in the Four Nations. It'll be fun to see them. I assume they will play together, but unfortunately, the Hughes brothers will not be getting together on the ice because of injury we're going to have coming up here. But for the Americans, the Tkachuks are going to be a fun pair to see out there together.
Flyers edge the Penguins 3-2 to snap a 5-game losing skid. Travis Konechny scored his 22nd of the season in the third period. That was the game winner. He's on the Team Canada roster. No Sidney Crosby due to injury. He is still hoping to play for Team Canada in the Four Nations, and the Penguins say it is his call on whether he will try and play or not.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Everything is his call. What are the Penguins going to say no to him about?
Not a thing. Not a thing.
You got it. Hey, I want this office. You got it. Let me get my stuff out of here right now.
Rangers knocked off the Blue Jackets in Columbus 4-3. Will Cooley scored the game winner with 1:39 to play. Defenseman Uro Vaikanainen, first goal as a Ranger and second career goal, tied it in the third period. And believe it or not, he's on Team Finland's roster for the Four Nations.
Oh, let me tell you, Team Finland's roster is awful. Their defensemen are devastated by injuries. Eddie, they have somebody that they named today that is, and I had to look it up. We watch a lot of hockey. We cover a lot of hockey. I've never heard of this player, and he's on the Four Nations tournament for Finland. Nicholas Matinpalo.
I don't even know what team he's on.
He's on the Ottawa Senators, and he's played a whopping 22 games in his career. He's a rookie. He's a 26-year-old rookie for the Senators. His last game for the Senators as a defenseman, he played less than 10 minutes. And he's on Team Finland in the Four Nations. So their blue line is awful. And Urho Vakanainen, former Duck, great. He's one of the better ones. I think he's probably going to be a top 4 defenseman out there because at least he's an NHL regular. This dude, 22 games in his career. Going up against Team Canada? Come on now.
Also in this Rangers Blue Jackets game for Columbus, Kent Johnson scored his 17th, and Zach Werenski, who's going to be playing for Team USA, assisted on that goal of Johnston, and that extended his home point streak to 21 games, 5th longest by a defenseman in NHL history.
Adam Fox hit a couple of milestones when he got his 40th assist in this game. It's the 5th straight season he's had 40 assists. He's the 4th U.S.-born defenseman in NHL history to do that. The others were surprising to me, and one of them, Gary Suter, sure. Phil Housley, sure. Torrey Krug, one of the others. And now Adam Fox, a former Norris Trophy winner. He's also the 5th skater and 1st defenseman in New York Rangers history, an original 6 team, to have 5 straight 40-assist seasons with the Rangers. The only other skaters that have done it, Andy Bathgate, Rod Gilbert, Jean Rattel, and Artemi Panarin.
Blues outscored the Blackhawks 6-5 in a shootout. Radek Faksa scored in the 10th round of the shootout in a game that featured 5 lead changes. Robert Thomas scored his 13th of the season in the 3rd. That sent the game into overtime. St. Louis veteran defenseman Ryan Suter played his 1,500th NHL game, 7th defenseman in NHL history to do that. In the loss for Chicago, Ryan Donato scored his 19th of the season.
And the 22nd skater to make 1,500 games. And Cam Fowler, they got him back in mid-December, did the St. Louis Blues. He is their leading scorer from the blue line since they got him. He's got 14 points in 26 games. Good to see him doing well. He was a Ducks favorite of mine for a long time. I know he became a kind of the whipping boy for a lot of the fans, but undeserved. Glad to see him doing well.
Canucks get by the Maple Leafs 2-1. Brock Besser's 18th goal of the season in the 3rd period was the game winner. Canucks goaltender Thatcher Demko continues his injury-plagued season, left this game with an injury and did not return. Kevin Lankinen, who's been a savior for the Canucks this year, comes on, allows 1 goal on 22 shots to get the win. Since the JT Miller trade, the Canucks are 3-1-1. Star defenseman, not stars. Star defenseman Quinn Hughes did not play in this one, missed his 4th straight game, and he has been ruled out of the Four Nations Faceoff for the USA. Obviously, that certainly hurts that roster there. He was replaced by Senators defenseman Jake Sanderson.
A little bit of a drop down in production there, but pisser for Quinn Hughes. Also in that game, Morgan Riley got his 86th career goal, tying him for 4th all-time in Maple Leafs history for goals by a defenseman. The all-time leader is Borja Salming with 148. Ian Turnbull with 112 is second, and Tim Horton, known for his donuts, but also a guy that scored a lot of goals once upon a time, is in 3rd. He ties, by the way, Hap Day, an absolutely great name, Hap Day.
Wild knock off the Islanders 6-3, rallying down 3-1 with 5 unanswered goals. Matt Boldy, who's playing for the U.S. in the Four Nations, had 2 goals, 19 and 20 for him. Marco Rossi added his 19th. In the loss, Andre Lee, his 23rd goal of the season for the Islanders. Predators snapped their 6-game losing skid with a 6-4 win over the Sabres. Philip Forsberg, who's playing for Team Sweden, had 2 goals, numbers 20 and 21. Brady Shea had 2 goals as well, numbers 6 and 7. In the loss, Alex Tuck gets his 19th for Buffalo.
We really thought, I think both of us thought, that it would be different this year for Buffalo under Lindy Ruff. And it has not been. It has been awful. It has been extremely disappointing. These are 2 teams that I thought would be a lot better than they are. I didn't think Buffalo would be great, but I thought they'd continue to make improvements. And I thought the Lindy Ruff addition was the right move at head coach. It has not worked. And I don't know what you try next if you're Buffalo, but very disappointing. And when you lose to a team that's lost 6 straight, that's never good either. That's a tough way to go into the break.
The Kraken fell behind 2-0, then rallied for a 3-2 overtime win over the Flames. Matty Beniers' power play goal in overtime was the game winner, his 13th. Shane Wright added his 12th of the season. In the loss, Nazem Kadri gets his 19th, and Morgan Frost his 13th and 2nd since joining Calgary from Philadelphia. Stars crushed the Sharks 8-3 in San Jose. Matt Duchene, a pair of goals for Dallas, numbers 21 and 22. Jason Robertson gets his 20th. San Jose actually had a 2-0 lead, scoring on their first 2 shots of the game, and then it was mostly downhill from there. Sharks goalie Vitek Vanecek allowed all 8 goals on 34 shots.
That is, how about the Stars had 15 players with a point in this game, and it is the 9th time in franchise history, 5th time since they've been in Dallas, since they've had 15 players. The other instances in Stars team history were actually not that long ago. March of 2023, they had 16 players, as also back in 98, and then in 2009, 2008, they had 15. So a lot of guys on the score sheet. And if you were one of the 3 that came out of an 8-goal game with no points, that's not a good feeling.
Also not a good feeling for my Kings to lose to your Ducks 2-1 in a shootout at Crypto.com Arena. I was there for that one. Anaheim goalie Lucas Dostal had a great game, 43 saves in net. Also stopped both shooters he saw in the shootout, while Trevor Zegras and Leo Carlsson, who's on Team Sweden, scored in the shootout for LA in the loss. Adrian Kempe, who's playing for Team Sweden, gets his 25th of the year, tied it up as a defenseman in this one, with the Kings looking to try and get some offense down 1-0. They put him on defense, and he ends up scoring a goal. Also, speaking of defensemen, Kings veteran Drew Doughty named as an injury replacement for Team Canada.
Yeah, that was a great game for the Ducks. I thought they played very well as far as defensively and in certainly in net, but they got the 1-0 lead on the first goal of the season from Brian Dumoulin. He had a big smile that one. And Dave Rittich may as well have not even been in net there. Those 2 goals were easy pickings on the shootout. Great moves from Zegras and Leo Carlsson that absolutely basically scored into an empty net. Just slick hands from those.
It is pretty, when you get to the shootout, and like the Kings, Adrian Kempe, Kevin Fiala, those are pretty skilled guys, but these young guys, like Zegras, and these practice those as kids, right? All the time.
They've been doing it their whole life.
Yeah, and it's just when you get those young kids, whether it could be like Bedard, it could be Celebrini, any of those really high-end young guys, you're like, oh yeah, this shootout is like, that's what they want. That's tailor-made for them. They practice those things since they were kids. So it's like really a big advantage for those guys.
Yeah, Leo Carlsson still just 20 years old. Absolutely love the future this guy has. And I thought, that again, a big win for the Ducks, and mainly because they actually go into the break 500. They have 54 points in 54 games. It is a huge jump from where they were last season. They're on pace for a 22-point jump from last season to this season. So absolutely massive improvement. And I don't know how they're going to finish once they make some trades here at the deadline. I don't know what moves they will make. They may add somebody for all I know. But the fact that they are still within shouting distance of a playoff spot, they're a 500 team. Very surprising and very delighted to watch this. And that was a fun one to watch, and a fun shootout for the Ducks as 2 guys score on beautiful moves.
And I guess I'll just say real quick, as a Kings fan, pretty happy with where they are, kind of where I imagine. I thought that they would probably be like the 3rd team in the Pacific. And they've got, it's something like 19 of 20. What is it? It was something like 20 of 30. Now it's probably, I guess it's 19 of 29 remaining at home the rest of the way. And they've been really good at home. So that helps to feel a little bit better about how they should go down the stretch and into the playoffs, but we shall see. Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday. We had 2 games early in the day. The Utah Hockey Club surprised the Capitals in D.C. with a 5-4 shootout win. Dylan Guenther gets his 20th, and Nick Schmaltz scored the only goal of the shootout. Utah goalie Connor Ingram did leave in the first period with an upper body injury, replaced by Kirill Velmelka, who stepped in to make 30 saves, also stopped all 3 shooters in the shootout. In the loss for Washington, Tom Wilson had 2 goals, numbers 23 and 24. Alexander Ovechkin, no goals, did have 3 assists. And with those 3 assists, he moved past our old friend Phil Esposito for 11th on the NHL all-time points list for the Great 8, 16 goals away from Gretzky with 27 games left in the season.
Dylan Guenther became the 8th player in NHL history to have 20 goals in a team's inaugural season. You'll never guess who holds the record for the youngest player to have 20 goals in a team's inaugural season, Eddie.
Well, if I'll never guess, then I guess why even try?
Wayne Gretzky,
Mm.
18 years old, 343 days when he had 20 goals for the Oilers. Dylan Gunther, the 8th youngest. The others, for those that are curious, Michel Goulet, Pat Falloon,
Oh.
Wilf Paymont.
Mm.
I'm not familiar. It was with the Kansas City Scouts. So that went by quickly. Billy Harris, Gilbert Perreault, and Reg Noble. He scored back with the Maple Leafs inaugural season in 1917. So going back a ways.
Just a little.
Yeah.
And our final game to recap, the Lightning beat the Canadiens in Montreal 5-3. Braden Point scoring his 31st goal of the season. Anthony Cirelli, who's on Team USA for the Four Nations, gets his 20th. In the loss, Brendan Gallagher had 2 goals, numbers 13 and 14, and rookie goalie Jakub Dobish pulled after allowing 3 goals on 8 shots. Montreal goes into the break having lost 8 of 9.
Hey, Toronto, objects in your mirror may be closer than they appear. The Tampa Bay Lightning are now 2 points behind the Toronto Maple Leafs for second in the Atlantic Division. They are flying up the standings with a 4-game winning streak going into the break, playing some great hockey right now. And if they have home ice advantage, that's not a good place to be if you're Toronto, having to go play Toronto or having to go play Tampa Bay in the first round. And then if you win, potentially having to play Florida in the second round.
Well, speaking of the Atlantic Division, let's check out the standings as we are going into the Four Nations break. Top team in the Atlantic is the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers with a record of 34-20-3 for 71 points. They have a 3-point lead over the second place Toronto Maple Leafs, who have 68 points. You mentioned the Lightning with 66 points, and then you've got the Senators with 62, Detroit 61, and the Bruins and Canadians the Bruins with 60, Canadians with 55, and the Sabres down there in last place, 49 points for Buffalo.
One thing I want to point out here is, as you look at the East, and then we're going to look at the West in a second, there are no bad teams in the Eastern Conference. The Sabres are the worst team in the Eastern Conference, and they're not terrible. As you see there, 49 points in 54 games isn't an embarrassment. That's still a team that can beat you on any given night. And their goal differential is only minus 14. So they're not a terrible team. They're just kind of unlucky. Very competitive conference, no easy games on a nightly basis. And the Atlantic Division has 5 playoff teams going into the Four Nations Faceoff.
Let's check the Metropolitan Division. Top team in the East and into the division, the Washington Capitals, 36-11-8 for 80 points. They've got a 10-point lead over second place Carolina with 70 points. The Devils are in third place with 68 points. Then you've got Columbus with 60. The Rangers, 58 points. The Islanders, 57. Penguins, 55. And the Flyers also with 55 points.
So again, Detroit has that last playoff spot right now, the last wildcard spot with 61 points. Ottawa, only 1 point better at 62. So as you're looking at that, and Eddie puts it up here on YouTube for us, the Blue Jackets, the Bruins, the Rangers, the Islanders, and I would say the Canadians and Penguins and Flyers are still in somewhat of race, but they have so many teams to catch and pass that's the problem for the Canadians, Penguins, and Flyers, and even the Islanders. I would say if you go down to the Rangers and up, those are the teams that I think are fighting for it. Although any of these teams, if they get hot and get on a winning streak in these last 25 games, could make a run.
Let's move over to the Western Conference Central Division, and the top team going into the Four Nations break is the Winnipeg Jets with 81 points, obviously 1 more point than the Capitals. Their record 39-14-3. They have a 9-point lead over the Dallas Stars, who are in second place with 72 points. Minnesota still hanging in there with 70 points. Colorado, 68 points. Then you've got the Utah Hockey Club with 57, St. Louis Blues, 55, Nashville Predators, 45 points, and the Chicago Blackhawks with 41 points.
I look at the far right column over there. You see in the top right, the Jets have already scored 202 goals in 56 games. Last season, the Sharks and the Blackhawks did not score that many all season in 82 games. The Jets are absolutely amazing, their offense this year. Very impressive what they've been able to do. And as you said, with a 9-point lead over some good teams, it's a nice cushion to have. Let the Stars, Wild, and Avalanche fight it out for second to see who has home ice advantage in that first round, while you kind of coast in here to see who you'll play in the wild card.
Over in the Pacific, the Oilers on top, They do have the same number of points as the Golden Knights, both with 72, but Edmonton has one more win and they played one fewer game than Vegas. So they are the first place team as we go into the break. The Kings are in third place with 65 points. Vancouver 2 points back with 63. The Flames have 60 points. The Ducks 54. Seattle with 52 and the Sharks 37 points.
The problem for your Kings is that I don't think they're good enough to catch the two teams ahead of them. And they're in a kind of a little bit of battle there. They've only have 4 wins in their last 10 games. The Canucks have gotten hot since the trade of JT Miller, 6 wins in their last 10. That could end up being a battle for third place. And if the Kings drop down to a wild card, I think that's a much tougher matchup, obviously, either playing Edmonton, Vegas, or Winnipeg in that first round.
Looking at the wild card race, Colorado and Vancouver, your 2 wild card teams. Then you've got the Flames, 3 points behind Vancouver as the first team on the outside looking in. We mentioned it, Utah 57 points, St. Louis 55, and your Ducks with 54.
Hey, I'm just happy the Ducks are on the board. I mean, the Kraken, the Predators, the Blackhawks, and the Sharks are all off that board. So the fact that they're within 9 points, it's unlikely. They got a lot of teams to catch and pass, but the fact that they're even playing competitive hockey is delightful.
As far as some individual leaders, your points leader is Nathan MacKinnon with 87 points. Leon Draisaitl is second with 83, and Nikita Kucherov has 82 points. Those are your only 3 players in the NHL that have scored 80 or more points at this point. Your leading goal scorer is Leon Draisaitl with 40. There are a number of other players who have hit 30, but William Nylander right now is in second place with 33. Mark Scheifele of the Jets, Sam Reinhart of the Panthers, and Braden Point of the Lightning all have 31.
The only other one that has 30 you didn't mention is Kyle Connor. 2 Winnipeg Jets with 30 goals as they go into the break.
Connor Hellebuck leads the NHL in goals against average at 2.07. His save percentage is second to Anthony Stolarz, but as you mentioned, Connor Hellebuck's played 43 games. Stolar has played 18. And it's Stolarz is a 929. Hellebuck is a 925. 6 shutouts on the season for Connor Hellebuck. And obviously he leads the NHL in wins as well with 34. The next closest goaltender is Jake Ottinger with 26.
And one of the most impressive things about Connor Hellebuck is he's been a workhorse. He's played more minutes than any other goalie in the NHL this year. So he's going out there on a regular basis. The workload does not seem to be too much for him. He's already played 43 games this season, and he's on pace for probably 60 starts at least. Wow. And that's a lot. Plus the Four Nations work.
Yeah, I got to imagine they'll be ramping him down a bit as the regular season.
It depends on the standings, but yes, you would think they would want to get him. But he's also probably one of these guys that likes to play and doesn't want to get some rust on his skates before the games that matter in the playoffs.
Anything to add before we wrap it up here with our first period?
Not one bit.
All right. Well,
stick around for the second period. Go if you're watching on YouTube. I cannot recommend enough. You find the podcast to listen to the second period. The interview with Matt Larkin is worth your time as we preview the Four Nations Faceoff.
All right, that will do it for our first period here on the YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it, you want to check out more, we have 2 more periods to bring your way. Just search for the Puck Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast. Again, if you're listening on the podcast already, second and third periods are coming up. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand, and we'll talk to you next Monday with another edition of the Puck Podcast.